Have you ever experienced that deep, unsettling feeling that the woman you love might be searching for something or someone beyond your relationship? That quiet voice in the back of your mind asking, "Am I really enough?" Most men push that feeling aside. They reassure themselves, "She would never do that, not her." But the reality is far more common than many are willing to admit. What you're about to hear isn't meant to frighten you. It's meant to prepare you. Because ignorance in relationships comes at a high price. Sometimes that price is your heart, your self-respect, and even your ability to trust again. Here's an uncomfortable truth that people rarely discuss openly. Women are capable of being unfaithful just as men are. Before you react with disbelief, hear this through to the end. This isn't about blaming anyone. It's about understanding psychology, human behavior, and the emotional patterns that often remain hidden beneath the surface. Many men grow up believing infidelity is mostly a male issue. Movies, television, jokes, and even conversations among friends reinforce that idea. Yet research suggests a far more complicated picture. Across many cultures and committed relationships, women can be just as likely, and in some situations even more likely, to become emotionally or physically involved outside their relationship. Why does this happen? Because emotional fulfillment often carries tremendous importance. A woman may have an attractive, successful, caring partner and still feel emotionally empty if certain deeper needs remain unmet. When she begins seeking those feelings elsewhere, it isn't always driven by physical attraction alone. More often, it's the desire to feel appreciated, understood, admired, noticed, and emotionally significant. Those needs operate beneath the surface, influencing decisions in ways many people fail to recognize. This is where many men make a costly mistake. They believe love by itself guarantees loyalty. They assume commitment automatically creates respect, that genuine effort will always be returned equally, and that devotion alone protects a relationship. Unfortunately, life doesn't always work that way. Those assumptions can leave someone vulnerable to betrayal that might have been recognized or even prevented through a deeper understanding of relationship psychology and emotional behavior. Today we're exploring the truths many people avoid discussing, the warning signs that often go unnoticed, and the repeating patterns that quietly develop inside countless relationships. By the end, you'll either begin seeing these dynamics more clearly or continue overlooking them until the consequences become impossible to ignore. Everything starts with awareness, and awareness begins by asking yourself one simple question. Can you look beyond what someone shows on the surface and recognize what they may truly be feeling underneath? One reality that many men never fully appreciate is that women often test emotional security and commitment, not necessarily through conscious planning, but through instinctive behavior shaped by attraction, survival, and social experience developed over generations. This doesn't mean women are manipulative or malicious. It reflects natural human behavior. When emotional or social needs begin feeling neglected, the mind quietly starts imagining alternatives. Small thoughts appear in the background, and if left unresolved, those thoughts can slowly grow into larger decisions. The danger is that many men mistake these moments for harmless attention-seeking, playful flirting, or innocent friendships. They laugh them off. They convince themselves nothing serious is happening. Yet those subtle behaviors can become the first steps of a much larger emotional pattern. Many people believe infidelity happens suddenly, a single poor decision during a weak moment. In reality, emotional distance often develops long before anything physical occurs. It usually begins with emotional validation. She starts appreciating compliments she no longer receives at home. She becomes invested in conversations with someone who listens carefully, offers encouragement, and reflects the admiration she's been missing. Every positive interaction gradually reshapes how she views her current relationship. This is one of the psychological shifts many men never recognize. What makes it even more complicated is that most women don't consciously want to hurt the person they're with. Instead, the mind becomes remarkably skilled at separating emotions into different compartments. That mental separation reduces feelings of guilt while allowing the pursuit of emotional fulfillment that seems increasingly justified. The internal dialogue often sounds familiar. He doesn't really notice me anymore. He's always distracted. I deserve to feel excited again. Meanwhile, her partner sees her smiling, laughing, showing affection, and assumes everything is perfectly fine. But beneath the surface, important changes may already be happening. The shift isn't only emotional, it can become biological as well. As attention and validation increase from someone outside the relationship, the brain begins releasing chemicals associated with pleasure and anticipation. Dopamine reinforces emotional attachment. Adrenaline adds excitement and novelty. These neurological responses slowly strengthen attraction long before a kiss ever happens, before a romantic text is exchanged, or before any confession is made. The process is nearly invisible, yet it's incredibly powerful. Most men only recognize the final stage, the obvious betrayal. By then they ask themselves the painful question, how did I not see this coming? Now you're learning to recognize the earlier stages. You're learning to identify the almost invisible changes that often appear before infidelity becomes obvious. Understanding these psychological patterns before they become physical gives you something incredibly valuable: choice. You can respond thoughtfully. You can strengthen communication. You can protect the relationship before emotional distance grows beyond repair. Or you can ignore the warning signs and risk the heartbreak that often follows unawareness. Now let's discuss the warning signs, the quiet signals that many men completely overlook. These are the behaviors that often whisper long before betrayal ever announces itself. The difficult truth is that if you're not paying close attention, you may not recognize them until the damage has already been done. Start by observing where her attention naturally goes. When a woman becomes emotionally invested in someone outside the relationship, her focus often begins splitting in subtle ways. At first, the changes seem insignificant. She lingers over her phone a little longer. She pauses while you're speaking because her thoughts seem somewhere else. A notification appears, and a smile crosses her face with an excitement you haven't witnessed in quite some time. Many men dismiss these moments because they appear harmless, even insignificant. But every small shift in attention can represent another thread being pulled away from the emotional connection you once shared. If those threads continue weakening without being addressed, they can eventually unravel into a deep emotional attachment outside the relationship. Second, pay close attention to the way she communicates. A woman who is considering, or has already entered into, an emotional connection outside the relationship often begins to pull back. Not through obvious conflict or anger, but through subtle changes. Her replies become shorter. She takes longer to respond. She stops sharing the little details about her day that she once volunteered naturally. She may still be warm and affectionate when you're together, yet the emotional depth between you slowly begins to fade. When a man overlooks these quiet shifts, he often convinces himself that everything is fine, never realizing that her emotional investment is gradually being directed somewhere else. Third, observe any noticeable changes in how she presents herself. Suddenly, she seems far more focused on her appearance, pays unusual attention to messages you never get to see, or becomes increasingly protective of her phone and social media activity. These aren't merely surface-level habits. They can reflect emotional energy being redirected beyond the relationship. She's becoming more aware of outside attention and preparing herself to receive it. Many men dismiss these behaviors as simple confidence or vanity, yet relationship psychology frequently identifies them as common warning signs that emotional boundaries may be shifting. Fourth, pay attention to how she handles disagreements. Women who become emotionally involved with someone else often avoid meaningful confrontations or steer serious conversations toward less important topics. This isn't always because they dislike conflict. In many cases, it's a psychological defense designed to protect an emotional attachment they don't want exposed. You may believe she's simply trying to avoid arguments, while in reality she could be separating different parts of her emotional life, creating mental space for another connection. What many men fail to recognize is that these patterns tend to be remarkably consistent. Emotional infidelity rarely appears overnight. More often it develops gradually over weeks or even months. Most men wait for dramatic evidence, a confession, an argument, or obvious physical intimacy. But emotional betrayal usually grows quietly, almost invisibly, hidden beneath everyday interactions until the damage suddenly becomes impossible to ignore. Ask yourself honestly, have you overlooked these small behavioral changes? Have you become so comfortable that you fail to notice your relationship quietly evolving in another direction? The difference between painful surprise and informed awareness often comes down to your ability to recognize these subtle cues early enough to respond. Awareness gives you the opportunity to strengthen communication, rebuild connection, and address problems before emotional distance becomes lasting damage. Now let's explore what truly drives someone toward emotional infidelity, the psychological triggers many men misunderstand, and the everyday behaviors that unintentionally create emotional distance. Many people assume infidelity begins with temptation, a single impulsive decision made in a weak moment. The reality is usually far more complex and, in many situations, more preventable. A woman's emotional world is deeply influenced by attention, validation, intimacy, and meaningful connection. When those needs remain unmet, or worse, consistently dismissed, they create an emotional emptiness that love alone cannot always repair. You may provide stability, security, loyalty, and physical affection. But if she no longer feels understood, appreciated, or emotionally important, her attention can slowly begin shifting elsewhere. This isn't simply about insecurity. It's a combination of biology, emotional conditioning, and learned relationship patterns. Most people want to feel chosen, valued, prioritized, and mentally engaged. When those experiences disappear for long enough, the mind naturally becomes more receptive to outside sources of emotional fulfillment. Another powerful trigger is predictability. Many men settle into routines. Healthy routines certainly have value, but relationships can become overly repetitive. The same conversations, the same evenings together, the same habits repeated week after week. Women often notice subtle changes in emotional energy long before men do. When excitement, novelty, and emotional engagement begin disappearing, the mind may quietly become curious about new experiences that promise fresh attention, renewed appreciation, and emotional stimulation. This curiosity doesn't always begin as physical attraction. More often, it starts with emotional interest. The excitement of feeling noticed in a new way can become surprisingly rewarding. That emotional reward gradually reinforces the new connection if the existing relationship continues feeling emotionally neglected. Another overlooked factor is emotional labor. Many men underestimate how much invisible emotional effort women invest in maintaining a relationship. Remembering meaningful details, listening attentively, offering encouragement, validating emotions, creating shared emotional experiences. For many women, these aren't optional extras. They're essential parts of feeling connected. When that emotional work becomes one-sided for too long, motivation and emotional investment naturally begin to drift. And wherever emotional investment drifts, romantic desire often follows. Then comes resentment. Not explosive anger, but quiet disappointment that accumulates over time. He didn't notice me today. He forgot something important to me. He never asks about the things I care about. Each disappointment may seem insignificant by itself, but together they stack one upon another until they create a growing emotional wall. Left unresolved, that distance becomes fertile ground for emotional attachment elsewhere. Here's the uncomfortable reality. Many men unknowingly accelerate this process. Complacency, emotional unawareness, dismissing concerns, assuming everything is fine without checking in. Each of these behaviors quietly adds fuel to emotional distance. The longer these underlying needs remain ignored, the more likely the mind becomes to seek fulfillment beyond the relationship. This isn't necessarily manipulation. It's often human psychology unfolding through repeated emotional experiences. So ask yourself honestly, are your daily habits strengthening your relationship or slowly creating cracks within it? Awareness is one of the greatest advantages anyone can have. Recognizing these emotional triggers early allows you to reconnect before distance becomes deeply rooted, because once emotional investment has been consistently redirected elsewhere, rebuilding that connection becomes dramatically more difficult. Now let's examine one of the most complicated dynamics in relationships: the subtle ways people justify their own behavior and the ways partners sometimes unknowingly make those justifications easier. Many men assume manipulation is always deliberate, carefully planned, and intentional. In reality, it often begins unconsciously. The mind naturally creates psychological defenses that reduce guilt and protect a person's self-image. When a woman begins developing emotional or physical feelings outside her relationship, she may gradually reshape her internal narrative until those choices feel easier to accept. She tells herself things like, "He doesn't appreciate me anymore. I deserve to feel alive again. It's completely harmless. It's only attention." These quiet internal stories soften feelings of guilt while making deeper emotional involvement feel increasingly reasonable. And this is the critical point that many men consistently fail to recognize. When a woman begins believing that her desires are completely justified, honest communication often starts to disappear. Instead of expressing what she truly feels, she may create emotional barriers and internal distance. Many men interpret these changes as simple mood swings, stress, or a temporary phase, never realizing they could be early signs that something deeper is changing within the relationship. Another important psychological pattern is compartmentalization. A person can create separate emotional spaces in their mind, allowing them to maintain feelings for their partner while also developing attention or emotional interest towards someone else. From the outside, everything may appear completely normal. She can still laugh, smile, spend time with you, and show affection at home while simultaneously building an emotional connection somewhere else. Many men view love in a very simple way. They believe someone is either completely loyal or completely disconnected. But human emotions are rarely that simple. Feelings, attachment, and desires can become complicated and layered. This emotional complexity is exactly what makes gradual emotional distance difficult to recognize unless you are paying close attention. Then there is projection, a psychological response that can appear in any relationship. Sometimes a person may place their own internal conflicts onto their partner. She may criticize you for behaviors that she herself is struggling with or questioning internally. "You don't care about me anymore. You're always distant. You never make me feel important." These statements are not always intentional deception. Sometimes they are unconscious ways of expressing frustration, redirecting guilt, seeking reassurance, or attempting to regain emotional attention. However, many men respond defensively. They argue, become frustrated, or withdraw further, not realizing that the emotional gap between them is becoming even wider. Finally, we need to discuss secrecy. Phones, private conversations, social media activity, and hidden messages are not automatically proof of betrayal. Privacy exists in every relationship. But when emotional connection begins shifting outside the relationship, secrecy can become a pathway that allows that attachment to grow. When someone feels emotionally unfulfilled, the human mind naturally searches for sources of reward, recognition, and validation. Small omissions, half-truths, or hidden interactions can slowly create space for an emotional bond with someone else. Many men view secrecy as a small issue, but psychologically, repeated secrecy can become a bridge that separates two people emotionally. The difficult truth is that many men fail to recognize the internal patterns that often appear before betrayal happens. They notice the obvious signs, the suspicious message, the unusual behavior, the increased distance, but they overlook the deeper emotional process happening underneath. Understanding these thought patterns and behaviors gives you the ability to recognize problems earlier. It allows you to notice warning signs before they become painful consequences. Now let's look closely at the signals that many men consistently overlook, the subtle behavioral and emotional changes that may reveal someone is slowly disconnecting. Many people believe cheating becomes obvious through dramatic actions, secret phone calls, late nights away, avoiding physical closeness. But psychology often reveals something different. The earliest signs are usually quiet. They are small changes that can easily be ignored unless you understand what to observe. The first thing to notice is her emotional energy. When someone begins losing emotional investment in a relationship, their energy often starts moving in another direction, even if they are still physically present. She may seem less engaged during conversations. She may appear distracted during moments that once felt meaningful. She may lose interest in activities you previously enjoyed together. Many men explain these changes by saying she's tired, stressed, or simply having a difficult week. Sometimes that may be true, but sometimes it represents a deeper shift in emotional focus. Because attention follows interest, and emotional energy often follows attachment, When that energy consistently moves away, emotional connection can begin weakening as well. Second, observe changes in body language. When someone feels emotionally connected, their posture, facial expressions, gestures, and eye contact naturally show openness and engagement. But when emotional distance begins growing, the body often communicates what words do not. She may cross her arms more frequently. She may avoid extended eye contact. She may create more physical distance during conversations. Even small changes in the way she laughs, touches you, or responds emotionally can reveal a subtle shift. Many men ignore these small signals because they seem meaningless. But these micro behaviors can sometimes reveal changes happening beneath the surface. Third, pay attention to digital behavior. Modern relationships exist in a world filled with technology, and emotional shifts often appear through digital habits. You may notice longer periods spent on the phone, more privacy around messages, new online connections, changes in social media behavior. None of these things alone prove betrayal. However, they can indicate that attention and emotional energy are being directed somewhere else. And emotional energy is often where deeper attachment begins.